Ever wish you had like a personal leadership coach? Like someone tucked away in your pocket, ready to give you advice on handling those tough conversations.
Really?
Well, today's deep dive is kind of the next best thing.
Okay, I like it.
We're going to unpack some really insightful excerpts from Susan Scott's book, Fierce Conversations.
Oh, yeah, I love that book.
And trust me, this isn't just for like CEOs and managers.
No.
Whether you're, navigating a tricky situation at work or even just like trying to have a real heart-to-heart with someone you love.
Yeah.
These principles can help you like level up your communication game.
Absolutely. One of the most fascinating things that Scott points out is that conversations are like these tiny little bricks that build our lives. It's our careers, our companies,
Right.
our relationships.
Yeah, she even kicks off the book with that Hemingway quote.
Oh, yes.
Gradually, then suddenly.
Love it.
It's such a perfect way to describe how those like seemingly small everyday interactions,
Right.
they really add up over time.
Yeah.
We might not realize it in the moment, but each conversation is like either strengthening those bonds or,
Oh, chipping away at them.
yeah, chipping away.
Absolutely. Yeah, true.
It's like, every conversation is a tiny deposit or withdrawal from our relationship bank.
Okay.
And just like with your finances,
Yeah.
you might not notice those small transactions
Right.
until suddenly you're facing, a deficit.
Oh, a deficit. And speaking of deficits, Scott has this term, unreal conversations.
Yes.
For all those times where we like dance around the real issue or we avoid honesty or basically we're just wearing masks instead of showing up authentically. You know, those conversations where you're like nodding along.
Oh, yeah.
But secretly thinking, are we even talking about the same thing?
Totally.
Yeah, those. And Scott argues that they cost us way more than we realize.
She does. She actually has this chilling story.
About a CEO who lied about taking safety precautions before an environmental disaster.
Oh, wow.
And it's a very stark reminder that avoiding those real conversations can have consequences that reach far beyond just one person.
Okay, I'm getting chills just thinking about that.
Yeah.
But it's not always about, avoiding those major disasters.
Right.
Unreal conversations, they drain our energy, they waste time, and I think they cheat us out of opportunities to actually like grow and connect
They do.
with the people in our lives.
Yeah, that's where the power of being known comes in.
Okay.
It's this deep human need that we all have to feel truly seen and understood.
This reminds me of when I worked for Mr. Timberlake.
Okay.
Talk about someone who had that gift of like deep listening.
Yeah.
He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, even in a crowded meeting.
And that simple act of truly listening can be so transformative.
Yeah, I agree.
It builds trust and loyalty in a way that like no motivational poster or strategic plan could ever do.
Absolutely. So how do we like tap into that? How do we become better listeners ourselves? Is there some kind of secret formula?
Well, Scott has this really interesting technique called the left-hand column.
Okay.
It's like a secret decoder ring for conversations.
Ooh, I like that.
So imagine you're having a conversation, right? And there are two columns. In the right-hand column is what's actually being said, the words themselves.
Okay, got it.
Well, in the left-hand column, you're going to jot down your immediate thoughts and feelings.
Hold on. Like I'm taking notes during the conversation.
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem a little rude?
Not at all. You can do it very discreetly.
Okay.
The point is to capture those gut feelings, those little whispers in your mind that you might otherwise, just brush aside.
I've tried this.
Yeah.
And it is wild what comes up.
Isn't it?
It's like you're giving a voice to that like intuitive part of yourself.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's like a warning sign like, something feels off here.
Right.
Or like a sudden flash of insight that helps you see the situation in a whole new way.
Totally.
It's really interesting.
Sometimes it's just a funny observation that helps you like connect with the person on a more human level.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those times when you need to address something like more serious?
Yeah.
Like when someone's behavior is causing problems. Confrontation. Not exactly my favorite word.
Oh, I hear you. Confrontation can be intimidating.
It can be.
But Scott argues that when it's done skillfully, it's actually essential for healthy relationships, both personally and professional.
Okay.
It's about clearing the air and getting to the heart of the matter.
So how do we, like, have these fierce conversations without things turning into, like, a big drama? Is there a script we can follow?
Well, Scott lays out this incredibly helpful framework called the 60-second confrontation model.
Okay.
Now, don't let the name scare you.
Right.
It's not about being aggressive
That's
or
right.
fitting everything into a minute.
Right.
It's really just about having a structured approach.
Hmm.
So you can be clear and direct while still being respectful.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the first step?
The first step is surprisingly simple, but so often overlooked.
Okay.
You name the issue, clearly and directly.
Okay.
No beating around the bush, no sugarcoating.
Right.
It's like saying, hey, this is what's going on and we need to talk about it.
That sounds terrifyingly straightforward, but I guess it does set the tone for an honest conversation.
It does.
Yeah.
And once you've named the issue, the next step is to provide a specific example.
Okay.
And this helps to avoid, those vague accusations
Yeah.
that just lead to defensiveness.
So instead of saying, like, you're always late,
Right.
you would say something like, I noticed you were late to the last 3 team meetings.
Perfect example. It's about being concrete and giving the person, something specific
Yeah.
to respond to.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this works. What comes next?
This is where things can get a little more vulnerable. You describe your emotions,
Okay.
but here's the key.
Right.
You use I statements.
Okay.
So instead of saying, you make me so frustrated,
Right.
you'd say, I felt frustrated when you were late
Yeah.
because it made me feel like our team's time wasn't being respected.
I can see how that would make a difference. Like, you're owning your feelings without blaming the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And after you've expressed your emotions,
Okay.
you clarify what's at stake. What are the potential consequences
Right.
if this behavior continues?
Mhm.
This helps the other person understand, the seriousness of the issue.
And it's not about being threatening, right?
Yeah.
It's about being honest about, like, the impact
Yeah.
of their actions.
Precisely. Now, here's where things get really interesting.
Ooh, I love when you say that.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
The next step in Scott's model is where you identify your own contribution to the problem. It's so tempting to, put all the blame on the other person.
Oh, yeah.
But even acknowledging your own role, even if it's small, shows that you're willing to, work together to find a solution.
That takes a lot of humility.
It does.
It's much easier to point fingers than to look in the mirror.
It's definitely not easy,
Yeah.
but it can be incredibly powerful.
Okay.
And it sets the tone for a more collaborative and less accusatory conversation.
Right.
Once you've acknowledged your own part, the next step is to clearly state your wish to resolve the issue.
So you're basically saying, hey, I'm not trying to attack you or punish you. I want to find a way to move forward in a positive direction.
Exactly. It's about focusing on the solution, not dwelling on the problem.
Right.
And finally, you invite the other person to respond. This is where you shift from talking to listening,
Yeah.
giving them space to share their perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. It creates a dialogue instead of like a one-sided lecture.
Right.
But let's be honest, even with the best intentions, confrontations can be tricky.
They can.
What are some tips for navigating those potentially charged conversations?
One of the most important things is to just stay focused on the issue at hand. Don't let the conversation get sidetracked by past grievances or
Yes.
unrelated matters.
Yeah.
It's like having a mental laser beam.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
You keep it focused on the specific behavior you're addressing.
It's so easy to get caught up in all that other baggage, especially in those emotionally charged situations.
Absolutely. And another key tip is to listen actively.
Okay.
Really try to understand the other person's perspective. Remember, there are always multiple realities at play.
That's such a good reminder.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get stuck in our own heads and assume that we know what the other person is thinking and feeling.
It is. And if things start to get heated, don't be afraid to take a break.
Yeah.
Sometimes, stepping away for a few minutes to cool down, it can
Right.
make all the difference.
I've definitely learned that the hard way.
Haven't we all?
Sometimes you just need a moment to gather your thoughts and calm down
Right.
before you can have a productive conversation.
One of the things that really struck me about Scott's work is her emphasis on finding common ground.
Okay.
Even in the midst of a disagreement, there's always some shared goal or value
Right.
that can serve as a starting point for finding a solution.
That's so true.
Hmm.
It's about remembering that you're both on the same team, even if you have different ideas about how to get to the finish line. But let's be real. Confrontation isn't the only kind of conversation we need to master, right?
Absolutely not. There's a whole spectrum of conversations, and each one requires a different approach. One of the things that Scott talks about is mineral rights.
Mineral rights.
It's this idea that when we listen to someone, we should approach it as if we're, mining for valuable insights, not just waiting for our turn to speak.
So it's about being curious and
Yeah.
asking questions,
Yeah.
not to challenge or contradict, but to genuinely understand
Right.
their perspective.
Exactly. And one simple but powerful technique she suggests is replacing the word but with and in our responses.
Oh, that's interesting. How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. When you say, I understand what you're saying, but,
Yeah.
it creates a sense of opposition, like you're about to disagree with everything they just said.
Yeah, I can see how that would shut down the conversation.
It does. But when you say, I understand what you're saying, and,
Okay.
it creates a sense of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
You're acknowledging their perspective and
Right.
building upon it.
That's such a subtle shift.
It is.
But I bet it makes a huge difference in how the other person feels heard.
It does.
It's like you're inviting them to be part of the solution instead of just, being the problem.
Exactly.
So besides this mineral rates idea, what other techniques does Scott offer for, improving our communication skills?
Well, remember that left-hand column technique we talked about earlier?
Uh-huh.
She suggests using that not just in confrontations,
Huh.
but in all sorts of conversations. It's a way to, tap into your intuition
Right.
and uncover those hidden truths
Yeah.
that you might otherwise miss.
It's like giving a voice to that little whisper in the back of your mind.
It is.
And sometimes that whisper is telling you something really important.
It is.
But Scott doesn't just focus on, external conversations. Right?
Yeah.
She also talks about the importance of having those fierce conversations with ourselves.
Absolutely. She calls these fierce conversations with the self, and they're all about taking the time for, honest introspection and self-reflection. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day
Yeah.
and lose sight of our values, our goals,
Right?
our overall sense of purpose.
It's like we're so busy running on the hamster wheel that we forget to ask ourselves, wait, where am I even going with this?
Exactly. And these internal conversations are essential for gaining clarity and making sure that we're living a life that's aligned with our deepest aspirations.
So it's not just about talking to other people.
Right.
It's about having those honest conversations with ourselves, too.
It is.
But how do we actually make time for that kind of self-reflection?
Right.
I mean, life is busy.
Well, Scott suggests finding those little pockets of time in your day,
Yeah.
whether it's taking a walk in nature, journaling, or even just sitting in silence for a few minutes. The key is to create space for those conversations to unfold.
That makes sense. It's about being intentional and creating those opportunities for quiet contemplation.
Yeah.
But what if you're the kind of person who hates silence?
Yeah.
I mean, some people just need to have the TV on
I get that.
or music playing in the background all the time.
It's not about forcing yourself to be silent if that doesn't feel natural.
Okay.
But maybe it's about finding a different kind of background noise. Instead of listening to, the news or scrolling through social media, maybe you listen to some calming music or nature sounds.
Okay.
Or maybe you just focus on the sounds of your own breath.
Interesting. It's like finding a different kind of soundtrack for your thoughts. But let's switch gears for a bit
Okay.
and talk about something that's been on my mind. We've covered a lot about being authentic and having those courageous conversations. But how does all this apply to the workplace?
Right.
I mean, let's be real. Work can be a minefield of politics and power dynamics.
That's such a great point, and Scott definitely acknowledges that. But she argues that's exactly why these principles are so crucial in the workplace. Because when you have a foundation of, clear, honest communication,
Yeah.
it can actually help cut through
Oh,
those
right.
politics and power struggles.
So it's not about ignoring those dynamics.
No.
It's about using these techniques
Right.
to navigate them more effectively.
Precisely. And one of the most powerful tools that Scott offers for the workplace is something she calls the decision tree.
Decision tree.
It's a brilliant way to clarify responsibilities and empower employees at all levels.
Ooh, I love that idea. It's like giving everyone a roadmap for decision making so they know exactly what they own.
Yes.
And where they have the freedom to act without having to run everything by their boss.
Exactly. Imagine you're drawing a tree with 4 levels, right?
Yeah.
At the top are the decisions that only the CEO or leadership team can make.
Got it.
Then, as you move down the branches, you have decisions that can be made by managers, then individual contributors,
Right.
and finally, at the very bottom, decisions that anyone can make.
So instead of every little thing landing on the boss's desk,
Exactly.
you're empowering people at every level
Yes.
to take initiative
Yeah.
and make decisions within like their realm of responsibility. I bet that frees up a lot of time and energy
So-
everyone involved.
It absolutely does. And the results are incredible.
Okay.
Employees feel a greater sense of ownership and accountability.
Right.
They're more engaged and motivated because they know their contributions matter.
Right.
Plus, leaders are freed up to focus on those high-level strategic decisions that only they can make.
It's a win-win for everyone involved. But let's be honest, sometimes work isn't all about making decisions and getting things done.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about celebrating successes
Right.
and recognizing people's contributions.
Mm-hmm.
How does Scott address that aspect of like workplace communication?
That's a great question, and she definitely emphasizes the importance of acknowledging and appreciating people's efforts.
Okay.
And it's not just about, like, generic praise.
Right.
It's about providing specific and meaningful recognition that resonates with the individual.
So it's about taking the time to understand
Yes.
what truly motivates and inspires
Right.
each person on your team.
Huh.
Some people might thrive on like public acknowledgement,
Right?
while others might prefer like a more private expression of appreciation.
Exactly. And one of the things Scott suggests is actually asking your team members, like, how they like to be recognized.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of feedback or appreciation feels most meaningful to them.
Okay.
It's about tailoring your approach to each individual.
That's such a simple but powerful idea. It's like you're saying, hey, I value you,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure I'm expressing that in a way that feels good to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about making them feel seen and appreciated for their unique contributions. And when you do that, it creates this culture of appreciation and respect
Right.
that fuels engagement and performance.
But let's talk about like the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Sometimes things go wrong at work.
Yeah.
Mistakes are made, values are compromised. How does Scott address those more challenging situations?
Well, she talks about what she calls integrity outages.
Integrity outages.
These are situations where there's like a gap between a company's stated values and its actual behavior.
Okay.
Like that example we mentioned earlier with the CEO who lied about the environmental disaster.
Yeah, those integrity outages can be pretty painful.
They can.
And I imagine they can do a lot of damage to like a company's reputation and morale. But how do you address those issues without creating a culture of fear and blame?
Right.
It seems like such a delicate balancing act.
It definitely is. And Scott emphasizes the importance of approaching these situations with both honesty and compassion. One of the things she recommends is starting with what she calls an integrity scan.
Okay, what exactly is an integrity scan? Does that involve like lie detectors and background checks?
Not quite. It's actually much simpler than that.
Okay.
It involves gathering feedback from employees at all levels about how well the company is living up to its values. It's about creating a safe space for people to speak openly and honestly, even if the feedback is, critical.
That takes a lot of courage, both from the leaders who are like soliciting the feedback
It does.
and the employees who are providing it.
Absolutely. And it's not just about identifying the problems. It's about working together to develop a plan for addressing them and ensuring that everyone is held accountable for upholding the company's values.
It's about creating a culture of like transparency and accountability where integrity is like woven into the fabric of everything the company does.
It is.
That sounds pretty ideal, but how do you actually create that kind of culture? Is it just about having more meetings and writing up more policies?
It's definitely not about just ticking boxes or going through the motions. One of the things Scott emphasizes is the importance of paying attention to our emotional wake.
Emotional wake. That sounds kind of mystical. Is that like an aura or something?
It's not quite that mystical.
Okay.
But it's definitely something we don't often think about. It refers to the impact our words and actions have on others.
Yeah.
It's like, the ripples that spread out from a stone dropped in a pond. Our communication can leave either a positive or a negative wake, and it's important to be mindful of the impact we're having on those around us.
So it's not just about what we say, but how we say it.
Exactly.
Our tone of voice, our body language, our overall energy.
Yes.
It all contributes
Yes.
to the emotional wake we create.
And think about it this way. Every interaction, whether it's a casual conversation or a formal meeting, is an opportunity to create a more positive, supportive environment.
We have this incredible power to influence the emotional atmosphere around us.
We do.
And we can choose to use that power for good.
Yes.
Or for, well, not so good.
And it's not just about being nice. It's about being authentic, empathetic, and respectful, even when we're dealing with difficult issues.
So it's about being mindful of the impact our words and actions have on others, but it's also about being true to ourselves. It's like finding that sweet spot where we can be both assertive and compassionate.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put that into practice? Are there any specific techniques that Scott recommends for creating a more positive emotional wake?
One of the things she emphasizes is the importance of asking open-ended questions. Instead of just giving orders or making statements, we can invite people to share their thoughts and perspectives.
So it's about turning those one-sided pronouncements into two-way conversation.
Exactly. And when people feel heard and respected, it creates a more positive, collaborative environment.
It's like you're saying, hey, I value your input and I want to understand your perspective.
Right.
But asking questions is only part of the equation, right?
Yeah.
We also need to be good listeners.
Absolutely. And I don't just mean hearing the words that are being said. It's about truly tuning in, paying attention to body language, and picking up on those unspoken cues and emotions.
It's like you're listening with your whole being, not just your ears.
And Scott emphasizes the power of silence in this process.
Silence.
Yeah.
But don't we always want to fill the silence with something?
I know.
It can be so awkward.
It can be, but it can also be incredibly powerful. She suggests incorporating pauses into our conversations, both to give ourselves time to process what's being said and to allow the other person the space to fully express themselves.
So it's about resisting that urge.
Yes.
To jump in and fill every gap with our own thoughts and opinions.
It's about creating a space for deeper understanding and connection. And it's often in those moments of silence that the most powerful insights emerge.
It reminds me of that analogy with music. The power lies not just in the notes, but in the rest between them.
Exactly. And just like a skilled musician knows when to hold a note and when to let it breathe, a skilled conversationalist knows when to speak and when to listen. It's about creating a rhythm and flow that allows for both expression and reflection.
This is so much deeper than I ever imagined. I'm starting to see communication in a whole new light. But we've been talking a lot about work. Does all of this apply to our personal lives as well?
Absolutely. Scott argues that these principles of fierce conversations are essential for all of our relationships. From our interactions with family and friends to our romantic partnerships.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
After all, communication is the foundation
It is.
of any healthy relationship.
She encourages us to bring that same level of honesty, intentionality, and courage to our personal conversations as we do to our professional ones.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that even the closest relationships require ongoing effort and communication.
They do.
It's not about achieving some perfect state of harmony. But rather just being willing to engage in those tough conversations when they're needed.
She emphasizes the importance of expressing our needs and desires clearly and directly, while also being respectful of the other person's perspective.
It's about finding that balance between assertiveness and empathy. Which allows us to navigate those inevitable conflicts and disagreements in a way that strengthens the relationship rather than tearing it apart.
One of the things Scott acknowledges is that having fierce conversations can be challenging.
Yeah, it can.
It requires vulnerability, courage, and a willingness to step outside our comfort zones.
But the rewards are well worth the effort.
They are.
When we engage in those courageous conversations, we open the door to deeper connection, greater understanding, and more fulfilling relationships.
She reminds us that growth and transformation often occur on the other side of discomfort. And it's in those moments where we push ourselves to be more authentic and courageous that we truly discover the power of fierce conversations.
That's such a powerful reminder. It's not always easy to be vulnerable and have those tough conversations.
Yeah, it's not.
But ultimately, it's what allows us to connect with others on a deeper level. But what about those times when we're working with like a team or a group of people?
Right.
How do we create a culture of open and honest communication in that setting?
That's a great question. And one of the things Scott recommends is establishing clear ground rules for communication. She suggests creating what she calls a team charter. That outlines the principles of communication and engagement that everyone agrees to uphold.
So it's like setting the stage.
Yes.
For respectful and productive conversations.
It is.
Everyone knows what's expected of them and what they can expect from others.
Exactly. This helps create like a foundation of trust and respect, making it more likely that people will feel safe to speak openly and honestly.
That makes sense. But rules are only as good as the people who follow them, right?
True.
How do you actually get people to like buy into these principles and make them a part of the team culture?
Well, Scott emphasizes the importance of modeling the behavior we want to see from others.
Right.
If we want our team members or our loved ones to be more open and communicative, we need to demonstrate those qualities ourselves.
It's about walking the talk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And when we do that, it creates a ripple effect that can transform the entire culture of communication within our teams and our relationships.
So it's not just about telling people how to communicate.
Right.
It's about showing them through our own actions and behavior.
It's about leading by example. And that's one of the most powerful ways to create lasting change.
This deep dive has been packed with so many valuable insights.
It has.
It's like having a master class in communication skills distilled into an episode.
What's really striking about Scott's work is that it's not just about techniques. It's really about shifting our entire mindset around communication, seeing it as a powerful tool for creating the relationships and the life we want.
It's about being courageous enough to be truly known, to speak our truth, and to listen with the intention of understanding, not just replying. But I have to admit, it can feel a little overwhelming. Like, where do we even begin to put all of this into practice?
That's a great question. And I think the key is to start small. Pick one technique or principle that resonates with you and start experimenting with it in your daily life.
So it's not about trying to like overhaul our entire communication style overnight. It's about taking small steps. And building those new habits gradually.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and evolving in our communication styles. The key is to stay committed to the process and to embrace the transformative power of fierce conversations.
I love that. It takes the pressure off feeling like we need to be perfect communicators all the time.
It does.
It's about embracing the messiness and the imperfection of the process.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about communication. It's this ever-evolving dance that allows us to connect with others on a deeper level and create more fulfilling relationships.
That's a perfect way to put it. But before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something we talked about earlier. Those fierce conversations with ourselves. What are some practical tips for like making time for that kind of self-reflection? I mean, life can get so busy.
That's so true. And finding those pockets of time for self-reflection can be challenging.
Yeah, it can.
But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be like a big formal event. It can be as simple as taking 5 minutes at the beginning or end of your day to just sit quietly and check in with yourself.
So it's not about carving out like hours of time in our already packed schedules. It's about finding those little moments throughout the day to pause and reflect.
Exactly. And those little moments can make a big difference.
But what if your mind just won't shut up?
Yeah.
Like, what if you sit down to meditate
Right.
and all you can think about is your to-do list or that awkward thing you said at work today?
That's totally normal.
Yeah.
And it's okay to let those thoughts come and go.
Okay.
Key is not to get, like, caught up in them.
So it's about observing those thoughts without judgment and gently redirecting your attention back to your breath or whatever your focus is.
And exactly. And if you find yourself getting distracted,
Yeah.
don't beat yourself up about it.
Okay.
Just gently bring your attention back to the present moment.
Okay. We've explored so much about becoming better listeners, about really building that trust.
Right.
But there's like one more piece of the puzzle that I think we need to tackle.
Okay.
Those heart-pounding, palm-sweating conversations, the ones we often try to avoid.
Yeah.
Confrontations.
Confrontations, yeah. The mere word can, like, send chills down your spine.
For sure.
Scott points out that these are often the conversations we need to have, but we put them off the longest, right?
Yeah.
Telling ourselves we're waiting for the right moment.
Oh, I am so guilty of that.
We all.
But deep down, I know it's just fear, like disguised as procrastination.
It is.
Scott actually argues that avoiding those real conversations,
Yeah.
that's what's truly dangerous.
It is. And here's where Scott's brilliance shines through.
Okay.
She doesn't just tell us to be brave, right?
Right.
She equips us with a practical tool, the 60-second confrontation model.
Okay.
And it breaks down the seemingly daunting task into, like, manageable steps.
So think of it like this. It's a roadmap.
Yes.
For navigating those choppy waters.
It is.
It's helping you stay on course.
Right.
Even when emotions are running high.
Exactly. The first step is deceptively simple,
Okay.
but incredibly powerful.
Right.
Name the issue. Skip the beating around the bush.
Yeah.
State the problem clearly and directly.
It's like shining a spotlight on the elephant in the room.
It is.
Like acknowledging its presence instead of pretending it's not there.
Precisely. Next, you provide a specific example of the behavior you're addressing.
Okay.
And this keeps things concrete.
Yeah.
Avoids those vague, sweeping statements that just trigger defensiveness.
So instead of saying, you're always late,
Right.
you'd offer a specific instance like, I noticed you missed the deadline for the project report last week.
That's a great example. Now comes the part that can feel a bit vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Describing your emotions. Remember those I statements we talk about?
Yes.
They're crucial here.
Okay.
You take ownership of your feelings without placing blame on the other person.
So something like, I felt frustrated when that deadline was missed because it meant we couldn't move forward with the presentation as planned.
Exactly. You're clearly expressing the impact of the behavior without making it a personal attack.
Right, right.
The next step is to clarify what's at stake. What are the potential consequences if this pattern continues?
Okay.
This helps the other person really understand the seriousness of the issue.
And it's not about, like, wielding threats.
No.
It's about painting an honest picture of those, like, potential ripple effects.
Right. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and let's be honest, a little challenging.
Okay.
The next step is identifying your own WN contribution to the problem.
Oof. That's where the real growth happens.
It is.
It's so tempting to, like, point fingers
Oh, yeah.
and play the blame game.
Right.
But owning our part, however small, it shows a willingness to, like, find a solution together.
It does. It also models that kind of accountability and self-awareness we'd like to see in others.
Right.
After acknowledging your part, you state your desire to resolve the issue.
Okay.
And this reinforces that the goal isn't to, like, punish or criticize,
Right.
but to find a path forward together.
So you're basically saying, hey, I'm not interested in dwelling on the past. I want to focus on how we can make things better going forward.
Exactly. It shifts the energy from blame to collaboration. And finally, you invite the other person to respond.
Okay.
This is where you truly become a mineral rights listener,
Right.
giving them the space to share their perspective without interruption or judgment.
That creates that sense of, like, safety and respect.
It does.
Like inviting them to be part of the solution rather than feeling like they're on trial.
Right. And it's important to remember that confrontation doesn't have to be, like, aggressive or accusatory.
Right.
When it's done skillfully, it's an act of caring. It's a way to strengthen the relationship by bringing those hidden issues into the light.
So instead of seeing confrontation as something to be feared, we can reframe it as an opportunity for growth
Yes.
and deeper connection.
Precisely. And remember that left-hand column technique we talked about?
Yes.
It's not just for confrontations. Use it in any conversation
Okay.
to capture those, like, fleeting thoughts and feelings that might hold valuable insights.
It's like having a secret decoder ring for your own mind.
It is.
It's helping you uncover those hidden truths that might otherwise, slip away.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into fierce conversations, let's remember that it's not about mastering some rigid set of rules or techniques. It's really about cultivating a mindset of courage, authenticity, and a deep commitment to connecting with others in a meaningful way.
And perhaps the most powerful takeaway is that every conversation, no matter how big or small,
Yes.
holds the potential to transform our lives and the lives of those around us.
So here's a question for you to ponder.
Okay.
What one conversation could you have today that, if approached with skill and courage, could change everything? Until next time, keep diving deep. And remember, the power to transform your life one conversation at a time is in your hands.